She won most talkative in high school, and she has been running her mouth ever since. Welcome to the Lisa Fisher Said podcast with your host, Lisa Fisher.
Okay, I love this. The straight shooting scientist. I didn't know there was such a thing because it's hashtag trust the science. I like your brand of science, Dr. J. I like what you say. I think you've ruffled a few feathers along the way.
Oh, sure.
In this pandemic-y type thing. But let's first talk about just the science side of what you do in your research. Was your first book the estrogen book?
Yes, estrogeneration. Yep.
Okay, let's talk about estrogen and what it's doing to us, and not just females, but males, our children, our grandchildren, and it's ubiquitous. Like we're getting too much estrogen, aren't we?
Oh yeah. It's decreasing fertility. It's causing fertility issues. Not just people that don't want to have kids, but actual fertility issues. Which makes sense, right? If you're disrupting your natural hormones, estrogen, testosterone, progesterone, of course you're going to have fertility issues. Increases depression. So even in children, for example, when they have higher levels of these fake estrogen chemicals in their urine, you see a lot more depression, which is sad because children shouldn't have depression. They don't have a mortgage. They don't have a car payment.
Right.
They don't have a stressful, annoying boss and job. So yeah, a lot of health problems. And of course, weight gain even, right? Like when women get pregnant, their estrogen goes way up. Their body stores more fat. It's a natural process. It's a good thing because our ancestors didn't always have access to food. But we have access to food, and if you're increasing your estrogen response with these fake estrogens, you're going to gain a lot of extra weight. It can cause weight loss plateaus. So clearly something you don't want to be exposed to, but literally everybody is. Everybody's being exposed to these things.
Okay, so if literally everybody's being exposed, that means it's environmental. Now I can control what passes through my lips, but I can't control sometimes my environment. So what in the environment should we're looking for to reduce that risk of too much estrogen? Yeah.
Well, you're right. I mean, most of it is in drinking water, and it's in the personal care products. It's things we're rubbing on our skin.
Yes.
Those are the big hitters. But even breathing it in the air and stuff, you're going to get some phthalates, these plastic chemicals and whatnot. But that's unavoidable. The little tiny bit we're getting from that's not that big of a deal. It has been shown in studies, though. Like if you send your kid to a daycare and there's literally just plastic on the floor, plastic toys everywhere, plastic. It's like 5 times above the government's own safety limits for the amount of phthalates they're breathing in for cancer, even for causing cancer. So even having like a very highly plastic environment, just from the air off-gassing, it can be a problem. And mattresses as well, like if you have a plastic smelling mattress, and a lot of infants do, and they've done studies on this, and I write about this in my book also. But so there's some hidden sources that we're probably breathing in certain situations. But at the end of the day, again, people have to filter their drinking water. It's full of fake estrogens, and they have to clean up their personal care products. Most people really do, because you don't want to be putting this stuff on your skin several times a day.
Right.
And sunscreen, too, kind of falls into that category.
Thankfully, sunscreen, we were all ahead of the game on the vilification of sunscreen. We knew it was poison, but thankfully when, I don't remember, National Institutes of Health, who published that study about 6 months, 9 months ago, year ago. I mean, I'm old, the years run together. And finally, doctors are now saying, there are no safe sunscreens out there, are there? And we were all going, no, we've been saying that for years. And when did the sun get to be public enemy number 1?
Yeah, that's insanity.
I mean, what has happened to us that we've taken, and I know you've pondered this, I mean, a lot of people in the health space have, we've taken what God's given us and we've thrown it out and said, look, I mean, it started with whoever made the fake breast milk, the formula.
Oh, the soy formulas?
Yeah. Crap. I mean, it's just crap. Or any formula. I mean, why wouldn't you use what God gave us instead of twist my mustache, go into a lab, make something fake, and I promise you it's better than what you have.
Right.
Like, when was that a good idea?
Yeah, I know. Well, and sunshine has so many other benefits too. Like, for example, do you have any tattoos? Probably not, right?
I don't. I mean, not that I'm going to show you, but go ahead. No.
Okay. Well, not that's going to get exposed to sunshine.
Right.
Because when people have tattoos, they'll be explicitly told put sunscreen on that tattoo because otherwise it fades away. Well, the reason for that is tattoos are actually heavy metals. They're particles of heavy metals, like balls of heavy metals. And the reason sunshine causes tattoo fading is because that sunshine hits those heavy metals and breaks them into smaller pieces.
And comes into your body.
Yeah, and then your body just clears them out, but it also increases your blood levels of heavy metals. It's not great for you, but at least sunshine is breaking it down. That's what it does. It doesn't have to be tattoos. It could just be crap under your skin from just like eating junk food or just being exposed to the garbage in our environment. So sunshine has beneficial properties, even in terms of detox, if you want to use that word, which a lot of scientists hate to use. But honestly, it's legitimate. You're detoxing. You're getting rid of toxins, and obviously the vitamin D, that one gets talked about a lot. But there's other benefits, even in terms of metabolism. It raises your metabolism, prevents depression with seasonal affective disorder, and a lot of people have genetic issues there. So.
It's magical.
Yeah.
The sun's magical. And that's coming from a person who hasn't been in the sun in 40 years, mainly because I hate hot weather, right?
Sure.
So I hate the heat. Arkansas has horrible summers. But now that I know that it's a part of my vitamin regimen, I'm now going outside. And I even have vitiligo. I have some things that you would maybe say stay out of the sun. I've worked so hard now, my vitamin D levels finally are at 50.
And, good for you.
But they started at about 28.
Yeah,
and
average American.
All right, the average American who's not a farmer. And even the farmers don't have good vitamin D because they're in those cabs now that are completely protected with UV light. My new thing, and I've got it right over here, is I splurged on the Juve red light therapy.
Oh, yeah. Cool. Do you see mine in the background? Probably not.
Oh,
I have a couple of them.
Yeah.
Right there. Boom.
Yeah. So we got the bigger model.
I
have, as we talked about before we got on the air, red-haired daughter. So she has some more skin conditions. So she has psoriasis. Her red-haired daughter has eczema. So I just told her, I said, and even babies are safe. Of course, this is not medical advice. Please ask your healthcare provider if you'd like medical advice. I'm just telling you how it's worked for us and what we're seeing. And so we're trying it. I'm going to see even if it treats my vitiligo, because it could help my melanocytes wake back up, and get me smelling it. If it doesn't, fine. I just know the therapeutic benefits it has. And so with the Juve light, then how come... Do we have to we don't have to cover our eyes with a red light therapy, right? Because red light...
Nope. Yeah, you don't. Yeah, correct.
That's fascinating, because haven't we all been told that light's bad, light's bad for our eyes? Or were we lied to there too?
It depends. I mean, in the evening, it can be problematic because blue light tells your brain that it's time to go to bed, and blue light tells your brain that the sunshine is still out, and so it confuses your brain, but it doesn't mean it's bad for you. It's good to protect against depression. If you've never had blue light in your eyes during the daytime, you'll get depression. But infrared is different because infrared is a lot less powerful. It's certainly not UV. It's the opposite of UV. There's like red, orange, yellow, green, blue, indigo, violet. Of course, Roy G. Biv. Well, infrared is even weaker than red. And then red is the next wavelength. And then all the way up to blue, indigo, violet. And then, of course, you have ultraviolet, which is very powerful.
Okay.
And so the blue, the indigo, the violet, the ultraviolet, those all tell your brain it's daytime. Infrared's way down here, right? So you can shine on your... I'm not a huge fan of like people holding a Juve light right up on their eyes, but I am a fan of holding it right on the brain because... And by the way, I did research at Mayo Clinic for an entire year on infrared light and stem cells.
Seriously? Oh.
Yeah. And I've done 3 years of Alzheimer's research. And they've done human cadaver studies with infrared light. It goes 3 inches through your skull. So it's pretty deep into your brain, and it helps to prevent Alzheimer's. In animal studies, it's phenomenal. Like they did these tinfoil hat experiments where they literally put tinfoil hats on mice, which is hilarious.
Sorry.
Yeah, no, it looks hilarious. It's ridiculous seeing them with their little tinfoil hats.
I love little mice, right?
And then they shine them with infrared light, and these are mice that they have get Alzheimer's. And the mice that have the tinfoil hats, of course, so there's 3 different groups of mice. There's mice with no tinfoil hat, there's mice with tinfoil hats, and then there's mice with no infrared. So the ones with the 0 infrared light they all get Alzheimer's. The ones with tinfoil hat has actually a lot less Alzheimer's than the other group because they're getting whole body exposure of infrared. It's not hitting their brain, but it's just hitting their body. Does that make sense? Okay. And there's actually less Alzheimer's there, even without hitting your brain. So, but in the third group, when you actually hit the brain with infrared light, you have way less Alzheimer's. So
don't wear a tinfoil hat around.
Don't wear it when you're
around town. For one thing, and number 2, even doing the red light therapy, let it soak in and get it to the back of your head.
Yeah, get it into your brain. And by the way, sunshine is 40% infrared light. So I'm not necessarily saying you have to go buy lights and stuff. You can just go out in the sun for that too. Right.
But see, you're way north. I mean, there are days that you have shorter days because you're in Minnesota. You have shorter days of sunlight than we do. And I mean, longitude, latitude have a lot to do also with your mental health. Think about it.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
I mean,
for sure.
Cold weather, it gets dark earlier. So you probably do have to work hard on things. But I will say this, you redheads have higher vitamin D than the rest of us.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Isn't that funny? I guess because you absorb it. Because everything's lighter?
Mm-hmm. Correct.
So African Americans probably have the lowest vitamin D.
Exactly. And the highest issues with COVID, for example. Mm-hmm.
Isn't that interesting? Yep. So vitamin D really is a magical pill.
Yeah. Oh, it's amazing. Yeah. And like you said, you want to be above 50. Like, I'm glad you brought up the number because, again, doctors will tell you that you're fine at 30 all the time. And they've done studies on hunter-gathering tribes with vitamin D. And everybody I've looked at the blood work. Everybody in those tribes is between 70 and 120 on their vitamin D.
Wow. So you don't think it gets toxic then at 80, 90 or anything?
No. Only if your vitamin K is super low or something else is wrong with you. But no, not at all. In fact, if you're below 50, there's increased depression. There's increased gut issues like leaky gut, different types of intestinal permeability. There's risks of fatigue, like chronic fatigue. There's muscle dysfunction. If you're below 50, there's all kinds of health risks. And as soon as you get above 50, all of those seem to disappear. But, so I'm happy. If you're just above 50, I'm happy. I'm okay with that. But yeah, I think based on our ancestors, they were probably walking around at least at 70 all the time. So wow, it's natural.
Okay, let's talk about the vitamin K connection. Do we need that? I don't understand its role when you take it in supplement form. Because vitamin D that I get outside from the sunshine's enough, right? But if I take it in a capsule or it's a gel cap, whatever it is, do I need vitamin K as a carrier? I don't understand.
Yeah, well, it just helps to protect your arteries from calcifying. So it helps to shuttle the calcium. So and this is true sunshine or pills. So if you go out in the sun, you still need vitamin K because even that vitamin D that you're getting from the sunshine, and by the way, cholesterol is the building block for vitamin D. So your body is using sunshine to convert cholesterol to vitamin D. So that's another plus for cholesterol. Cholesterol is good for you. It makes testosterone, it makes progesterone, it makes estrogen. It's the building block
hormones,
for vitamin D.
Right.
Yeah. So cholesterol is the building block for vitamin D. And if you have too much vitamin D and not enough K2, if that ratio is off, it just puts the calcium into your arteries instead of into your bones.
So then how can you convert that safely, or so you're not getting too much of the K2? How do you avoid that?
Well, it's hard to get too much K2. They did a recent study on people from Japan that were eating loads of K2 because they'd eat these fermented products that have just grams of it. Not milligrams, but grams. And they're fine. So you'd expect blood disorders and stuff or clotting or whatever, but your body kind of figures out. I'm not a big fan of taking a ton of K2, but I think people need at least a little bit. And we don't eat a lot of fermented foods, so a lot of people are kind of low on K2. Eat some fermented foods. You don't have to go buy supplements for everything, but you certainly can if you don't like fermented foods or if they don't agree with you or something.
Have you had the Bubby's brand fermented foods? Bubby's is real good. It's got the mother bacteria.
Oh, yeah.
And then I just found I'm always going and trying different ones because it's good. I mean, some people I know don't like that vinegary, briny taste. I love it.
Yep. Oh, me too. Sauerkraut and stuff.
Yes, love it. But that's it. I try to find the real sauerkraut, not just pickled products. So you kind of have to look.
Yeah, canned. But
you'll be able to find it. Okay, so vitamin D, our best time going outside every day, and how long should we be outside to absorb?
Oh, it's different because of your skin tone. It does matter. I mean, me personally, I set a timer 15, 20 minutes and that's it, but definitely that differs for different people. And I also take my shirt off and stuff, so I'm getting more surface area.
Right.
The amount of surface area you have is different. And once I get that time, once I hit my time, then I go the other direction. I put like a sun shirt on, and I put sun gloves, and I even have like a buff that I put on. Like if I'm in Florida fishing all day. Oh yeah.
Oh.
Like I would get fried, so I have like this whole. I even have pants that are like sun pants that are super lightweight, and I wear socks when I'm in my kayak and stuff.
Is that because? Oh, that is nerdy. That's funny.
Yeah,
I mean, you're doing it for your health, but everyone else is looking at you going, he doesn't know the fashion of the 21st century. Are you doing that because you are a redhead and you're worried about the UVA and UVB exposure at that point?
Oh yeah, well it's like exercise, right? Like sunshine is great for you until you overdo it, and then you're overtraining, and then you're getting inflammation, and your body starts to disintegrate. It's like if you're deadlifting every single day, you'll actually get weaker. You won't get stronger.
Isn't that crazy?
So it does the opposite of what you want, and the sunshine is the same, of course.
Okay, so this generation's been raised with the magical cream of sunscreen, and we now know that
right.
Skin cancer is actually increased in the last 20 or 30 years when we started again making the sun the devil. Because I came from a red-haired mother who obviously there was redheads in her family. So are redheads, are you still looking though to prevent skin cancer, or were we getting skin cancer from what we were putting on our skin?
Well, it depends, right? But yeah, I mean, there's definitely indications that like the fake estrogen chemicals increase cancer. I mean, there's a lot of studies, and I talk about a ton of them in my book. But, the problem with cancer is it takes a lot of years to come out sometimes. Most of the studies they do are like 6 weeks, and they say, oh my gosh, look at that, it doesn't cause cancer. So
okay.
It can be, well, and so long-term does matter, but they usually don't study it because it's not funded. But furthermore, these estrogen chemicals, like oxybenzone is the big one in sunscreens. There's two of them in sunscreens. One's called 4-methylbenzaldehyde camphor, which is less common, but just super problematic. And the other one is oxybenzone. Oxybenzone, look on your ingredients. If people are at home, look on your ingredients, pause this. Okay. You'll see it's in there. But the problem with both of those is they act like estrogen in your body. They disrupt your natural hormones. And so, of course, they're going to lead to all kinds of problems, maybe cancer, but maybe other problems. And the other thing is, it's additive. So if you have oxybenzone, and by the way, they sneak it into your shampoo, and then they brag about it and say, look, your shampoo protects your hair from UV degradation, right? And it's still going through your scalp and in your skin all day long. And they put it in a lot of laundry detergent, and they brag about it there too and say, look, it protects your clothes against UV degradation. And they've even done studies on that, ironically, and they've shown that if they wash clothing in these types of laundry detergents and they put it on, you actually absorb those chemicals, even though it was washed in the water. Just like the fragrances stay in the clothing, those estrogen chemicals, the oxybenzone, that stays in clothing. That's how it protects against sunshine breaking down your clothing, but that's how it also ends up in your bloodstream and increasing your blood levels, which they have proven in scientific studies. But it gets worse, because if that was the only chemical we were exposed to, sure, whatever. And when we do scientific studies, that's the only chemical the researchers will generally look at. They'll say, let's just look at oxybenzone for 6 weeks. Oh my gosh, look at that, it doesn't cause cancer. Well, that's not the only one in your blood. You're exposed to a lot of soy products which have estrogen. You're exposed to a lot of fake plastic chemicals that are from petroleum that act like estrogen. You're exposed to parabens and phthalates and BPA and BPS and BPF and BPA, like all the BPs and etc., right? Like all these chemicals that I write about, those are additive. It's like 1 + 1 + 1 + 1 + 1, right? So if you just remove one of those pluses, it's good. It's better than not removing that, but it's a bigger picture that's more complicated than a 6-week study of just oxybenzone.
Right. It's cumulative, and it's our health field, or it seems like medical researchers only find one piece of a puzzle and then go, all right, everything's fine. Whether it's the thyroid blood test that my people, because I'm a health coach, my clients get, they'll go, my thyroid's fine. I go, how do you know? They'll say, well, my TSH is fine. I go, oh, no, sister, back up. Let's look at T3, T4, free T3, free T4, let's look at cholesterol. Let's look at all these things to make it work. Speaking of cholesterol, I love it. I have a high cholesterol, and I'm proud of it because my sex hormones work. My thyroid now works fine. My, the only medicine I do have to take, once your thyroid gland, as you know, is attacked by itself, it finally shrivels up, it dissipates and dies. So I do have to take a hormone replacement for that, but nothing else. And
Good.
I found a healthcare provider that doesn't hassle me about my, whatever my cholesterol is. It's, that, in fact, that's a sign of low thyroid is if your cholesterol comes up. So mine sometimes is 240 or 250, but we look at ratios, and I'm like, back off. I mean,
if it's below 300, I'm as happy as could be, I think.
Oh, is that right?
Oh yeah, I did a 5-year PhD on this topic at Boston University Med School. It's something that I'm very passionate about because to get into the research is super nuanced. It's super annoying that people get like all bogged down into like some of these studies. But at the end of the day, there's a study, people can Google this by just looking up, there's a study with 12.8 million people.
Okay.
It's on the topic of total cholesterol and all-cause mortality. If you use those three words, 12.8 million people, all-cause mortality, total cholesterol.
Okay.
You'll see in that study, I believe it's page 4.
Okay.
I believe it's figure 2.
Okay.
It's figure 2 in that study, but look at figure 2, and what it shows is that the optimal range, and by the way, all-cause mortality, what they're studying in that study is death. They're studying just death by any cause. Like, where's your cholesterol and death? So it doesn't matter if you die of a heart attack, doesn't matter if it's a stroke, doesn't matter if it's lung failure, whatever. It's just they're looking at death and where your total cholesterol. And the absolute highest hazard ratio, and hazard meaning like hazard of dying, the highest hazard of dying is when your cholesterol is below 170. Like if you want a really high risk of dying, go vegan and bring your cholesterol down to like 110.
Right.
Like that's a disaster for your health. All cause mortality. We're not just talking about heart attack. And if you want to be super optimized, keep your total cholesterol between 180 and 280. As long as it's in that range, I'm as happy as could be. Now, if you get above 300, I start to get a little bit nervous. Let's talk about the particle size. Let's talk about LPA. Let's talk about Hdl Ldl ratios.
And you can see that. Can you see the particle size from lab work?
Oh, for sure. Yeah.
Okay, so you could take that information back to your doctor and say, okay, simmer down. Let's look at particle size. Let's look at ratios.
Right. But most people aren't above 280 on their total cholesterol or above 300. Most people, their doctors are complaining when they're above 200. Their doctors start to panic.
That's right.
And that's absurd. Like, that's not founded in good quality, solid research and thought. That's just propaganda by the drug companies influencing the medical schools. And by the way, they only take like one class, or maybe like 1 week of classes in their entire career on the topic of like statins and cholesterol and all this, and they think that. And honestly, I've tried to argue with them. I'll bring the doctor's studies and all this, and I'm showing them the studies. And they still think my cholesterol's too high if I'm 250. They don't even care, and I'm showing them the actual research. So if I can't convince them, I know nobody else can convince them. And this isn't every single doctor, but I'm just saying a lot of them, a surprising amount of them. And it's because the blood tests are putting a red flag on it and saying it's bad, so they're assuming it is bad, and they're assuming anything that lowers cholesterol is therefore good. Vegan diet, then, of course, should be amazing because it does lower your cholesterol.
And
is
Cheerios.
That good? They assume it's good. Yeah, Cheerios, yeah. Oatmeal.
Yeah, which is just crap. I mean, it's just crap food.
It's just carbs.
Yeah, that's right. It can lower your cholesterol. But vegan diet, you look a mess, because a lot of times vegan, you replace it with soy and gluten. And a chiropractor that I follow said she had severe cystic acne, PCOS. Oh yeah. All because she was a vegan.
Oh yeah, happens all the time. I mean, yeah, I literally just had a podcast I was on, like just 3 minutes before this. I jumped off that one, and she had been a vegan as well, and she had the exact same story. She had all these health problems that had come out of that, and that's what transformed her. And it's funny because I've been invited on vegan podcasts, and I'm perfectly happy to talk to people that are vegans. I'm not judgmental about it. Some people it works amazing. I don't think it's the majority of people, but I think it does work for some people. But then they uninvite me when they discover that I'm against soy. As soon as they find out I don't like soy, they literally they'll send me an email.
I mean, who can say that they like soy? I mean, it's so
all
disruptive.
The sponsors.
Oh, got it.
It's all corporate sponsored stuff, you know. But that's the problem, right? Like that's where the money is coming from. So of course they're going to try and twist the research to show that soy is beneficial instead of soy is bad for you. And the research is super messy on that topic. I mean, I spent almost a whole chapter in my book going through that because it is a mess, it is a nightmare, but it needs to be simplified and it needs to be clarified for people because, you know, is it bad for you? Is it good for you? Like, we should know. You do want to know. It's everywhere, right? Soy is everywhere.
It's a shame, but it is. Mm-hmm. And it's hard to tweak that one. I think about Asian cultures then, because those of us with Hashimoto's, we do know that Americans and Asian women have higher incidence of Hashimoto's thyroiditis. But we don't have the soy consumption that Asians do. So I always wondered what tipped them, because they're small frame, they're not necessarily overweight, where they don't have a standard American diet. So are they...
Yeah.
They eat a lot of soy, tempeh, a lot of soy.
Exactly, tempeh, yeah. It's fermented. They eat fermented soy products, and they did a study in Canada of over 100 food items, plants, just all plants, and how much plant estrogen is present. They call it phytoestrogen, but it just means plant estrogen. And all the foods that they looked at, broccoli, cauliflower, I mean, 100 plants, like a huge amount of them, different types of beans, everything. They were all under 1,000 units of estrogen. They were all lower than 1,000, but soy was over 100,000 units of estrogen.
Oh, wow.
It's a huge difference. But here's the reason I bring that study up is they tested actually fermented soy sauce.
Yeah.
And things like tempeh and whatever, like things that were actually fermented with soy, they were back down to like 500 or 100 units of estrogen. Instead of 100,000, now you're at 100. That's a huge difference, you know what I mean? And the problem with most soy products in America, we're not fermenting them. So you're getting that blast of estrogen.
Oh, that's why I take my coconut aminos with me when I go to eat Asian food.
Yeah.
I'm like, no thanks. And plus they have gluten. Soy sauce has wheat in it.
A lot of it. Yeah. I always get the gluten-free, but yeah. And by the way, speaking of Hashimoto's, some people have a genetic, and of course I do DNA consulting, and some people have a gene called CTLA4, and that's a gluten sensitivity gene that increases your risk of Hashimoto's. It's basically a celiac gene that triggers Hashimoto. So you eat gluten, it screws up your thyroid. Whether that's permanent or whether it's just temporary, whether you're just tired immediately or whether you're tired for 2 weeks or whether it's permanent. But that's a genetic risk that's very specific.
Isn't that interesting? Because I don't have celiac. I do have 6 autoimmune conditions. I don't have celiac. So I'm wondering now, because I have completely removed seed oils, soy, gluten. I still eat dairy. I don't feel like it bothers me. And my Hashimoto's thyroiditis can't even detect it now. My antibodies one time were 2,400. Now they're 39, which doesn't even flag it. So I will say for me, so I wonder now if it's a genetic component for me that caused that, because I've totally reversed my Hashimoto's. Now, my gland is dead because, it just got battered all that time. That's why I said earlier I have to take the medicine. But that's interesting. CTLA4. Can we test for that in lab work?
No, just genetics. You just look at people's DNA. Like 23andMe is how I test for it. Yeah. It's easy.
Okay. Do you like the 23andMe? Do you like those little home kits?
Yeah, because they give you over 650,000 SNPs. So it's just like thousands of pages of data as far as I'm concerned, and I look at it for health markers. And by the way, some people, it has nothing to do with gluten for their Hashimoto's. Some people have a risk. It's called FOXE1. The gene is FOXY1, like Foxy Lady. You've heard that song?
Yeah.
FOXY1. And FOXY1, FOXE1, is a gene they discovered in Chernobyl, the radiation accident. Yeah. And basically people with the bad version of that gene, when they had radiation damage, they permanently damaged their thyroid. Like their thyroid never came back. Whereas people that had the good version of that gene, their thyroid healed up just fine. It wasn't that big of a deal. And the solution, now they've done more research on it, obviously. And it's related to autophagy in your thyroid gland, meaning like people with the bad version of that FOXY1 gene, they don't take out the trash very well in their thyroid. The thyroid cells don't take out the garbage. And the people with the good version of the gene, they take out the trash better. So intermittent fasting is super important for people that have that Hashimoto's
for the win.
gene.
I mean, it's my answer on everything. Do intermittent fasting. I will start my 5th year of intermittent fasting November 24th. So
I'll start my 35th year at least.
Is that right? So you did it long before it was cool?
I've been doing it since I was 5 years old.
You didn't eat breakfast? Your mother didn't make you?
No, all they had was cereal at my house. And it hurt my stomach. I was so gluten sensitive, and I didn't know it at the time. And I kept eating gluten even for lunch and dinner and whatnot. But I was one of those like super skinny, kind of borderline malnourished kids. And it took me, like, I didn't know I was gluten sensitive until, basically around when I got my PhD. I discovered it on my own because one of my kids had it, and I had to figure that out. Right. And then I figured it out for myself at the same time. But I've skipped breakfast because it gave me a stomachache, and I've never gone back, and it feels like garbage if I eat breakfast now because it's so normal for me.
That's great, but now I have such maternal guilt that I homeschooled my kids, and I would say, you have to come eat this breakfast for your brain. Yeah. And now I know.
Kids it is different. Kids it's different because their metabolism is really high, so they can go either way. And by the way, I homeschooled and I homeschool my kids. I have 5 kids.
Is that right? Good.
So great. I think I love it. But
mine finally went in high school, and but I have an engineer. He got a full ride. They all did what they did fine. Because they'll blame me sometimes and go, but it's because I was home. This is one of their funny things. They'll say, they'll go, was Monk really a good show? Remember that Tony Shalhoub show? And I go, yeah, why? And they go, or was that because we were homeschoolers and anything we didn't get to watch much? And I go, no, hilarious. That was good art. They blame anything that they felt sheltered. Is it because we were homeschooled? I go, no. Silly. Okay, back to your red-headed genetics and gluten sensitivity. Is there a connection there?
Yeah, but it's just like tribes from that region didn't have a lot of grains. It's like the blood type. There's a book called Eat Right for Your Blood Type, and a lot of it's just like associations. Like it's like, if you're there were certain tribes that just they all were breeding with each other, whatever you want to call it. They just had very similar genetics because they didn't have airplanes, and they didn't have trains, and they didn't have cars, and they weren't just traveling around. They weren't like intermixing and intermingling much. So those tribes had a certain blood type or whatever, and then they oftentimes also had this gene and this gene and this gene and whatever. And then whereas this tribe over here has a different blood type, and they stayed away from that other tribe, and they just happen to have this gene and this risk and whatever. And it's similar with the gluten and the redhead, where obviously now we live in a melting pot of America where, just because you have red hair doesn't mean like you're purebred from some specific tribe where all your genes are the same as other people. But I mean, there are some predictive things. At the end of the day, though, I just go with the genetics, the DNA itself, and look at the code, because that's the most precise way to figure that out, right?
Well, okay, let's go back to your book, because one thing you said in that book about estrogen, because I've removed all the stuff to clean my laundry detergent, no fragrances, but I was spraying lavender spray on my drying. And then you say in your book that has a high estrogen effect or absorption or something to us. So toss that out. So tell me about lavender. I thought it was a magical thing that we could all sniff every day and go to sleep easier and be relaxed.
Yeah, it is anti-inflammatory. They have done studies proving that it's anti-inflammatory, and a lot of people do have a lot of chronic inflammation, so they notice a difference. It is beneficial. The problem is it comes at a cost. There's other anti-inflammatory things that are not estrogens. Lavender does act like estrogen, and there's been multiple studies, and the researchers that actually study this are very convinced, which is also a strong argument, because people argue about the source of lavender in the studies and all this. They say like, well, that's that essential oil, but my essential oil is pure and this and that. And it's like, well, have you ever tested your essential oil? Have you checked to see if yours acts like estrogen? Because all the different brands that they've tested have acted like estrogen. So, I get it that there's a lot of debate about this, because in a lot of health products, they include lavender essential oil. But it disrupts your hormone. It acts like estrogen. I've seen, like, you can actually do this luciferase assay. You can do a cellular study. It's a biochemistry study where you just compare lavender essential oil to actual estrogen and how much it activates the receptors. And it activates them almost exactly the same amount as natural estrogen. So it's very strong. It's powerful estrogen mimetic. It mimics estrogen.
So you've tossed it from the J family arsenal.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Didn't you also say rosemary? There was something else in that list that...
There's a few other ones that act like estrogen
that I really
a little
love.
bit. Well, tea tree oil. Tea tree oil
Yeah,
also,
tea tree oil, yeah.
But lavender is the one that disrupts the most. They call it endocrine disrupting. Some of them, like even rose auto, acts like estrogen a little bit, but it's not like disrupting your estrogen. It just acts a little bit like estrogen. So there's an argument like, well, if you just have a little bit, it's not a big deal. Whereas the lavender, I think, is the most clear in terms of the research. Tea tree, I also avoid that for the most part, just because there's enough research where I get nervous, and it's just like, well, why bother? Why have that one?
With our estrogen absorption, let's say hypothetically, we're postmenopausal and we're empty nesters. Should I still worry about too much estrogen for me? Because I do bioidentical hormone replacement. Should I be using that in the continuum, thinking, well, I'm getting estrogen? Yeah.
I'm a huge fan of bioidentical hormone replacement therapy. Replacing your hormones is key. If you want to stay optimized in your health, you have to replace your hormones as you age, generally. And estrogen is good for you. Like, natural estrogen is protective against Alzheimer's. It's protective for your arteries. It's phenomenal for you.
Right.
Yeah, and so is testosterone, and so is progesterone. So anybody who just does one of those and they forget about the other two, if you're a woman and you're postmenopause, well, that's short-sighted. You should look at all three. Some people don't need all three, but you should at least be looking at all three, and preferably even looking at the genes that you have disposing you for low testosterone or whatever. Because all of those are beneficial. Now, what matters most is the ratio. Like, if your estrogen is super high, but your progesterone is also super high, that's great. Like, you got all kinds of benefits, all kinds of energy, you feel better. Now, if your estrogen's super high and your progesterone's super low, like that ratio is off, well, then it's a problem, and you can call it estrogen dominance, but it's not really the estrogen's fault. It's just the low progesterone. So there's like a nuance in this topic, but a lot of people, they say, well, I'm postmenopause and I don't want to take drugs. Well, first of all, identical hormones are not drugs. They're actual hormones. Your body is totally used to seeing them. Yeah.
They're not made in a lab by big pharma who's trying to sell you something. I mean, they're bioidentical. Correct. They're as close to you as anything, and they are game changers.
It's the same molecule. Yeah. So that's the first thing. And the second thing is they'll say, well, I don't want to take drugs. Well, that's bullshit because these aren't drugs. But they'll say, I'm going to do soy instead, right? Or I'm going to do lavender, or I'm going to do whatever. And the problem with that is some people are okay, like some people's bodies are okay with that, but it's risky. It's a lot riskier. It's not natural. And the other thing, and it's a little bit complicated probably, but there's actually two receptors that pick up estrogen. There's two different receptors. Like when you have testosterone in your body, there's only one receptor that picks it up. It's called the androgen receptor. Right. So it's very simple. It's like testosterone sticks to this receptor, it goes into your body. Now, estrogen, because there's two receptors, we have to look at both of those. One of them's called estrogen receptor alpha, and the other one's called estrogen receptor beta, alpha and beta. Now, alpha is only supposed to be activated when you're in the womb as a fetus. Like it's involved in sexual development. You're not supposed to be like flipping on the light switch of alpha, the estrogen receptor alpha light switch, because it can cause depression, it can cause breast cancer, it can prostate cancer in men, all kinds of problems. You don't want to be flipping that light switch on. Now, beta, estrogen receptor beta, is where we get all the benefits from estrogen. That's the one that protects against prostate cancer in men. It protects against breast cancer in women. It protects your brain. It protects everything. It's great for you. You want to be flipping on that light switch as long as your other hormones are in balance. And the problem with things like soy, they flip on both of those light switches.
Oh, so and we don't want the alpha. We just want
you've got
beta.
Alpha and beta. Yep. And there's some studies that say, oh, look, soy activates beta more than alpha. But then there's other studies that show, oh, look, soy activates alpha more than beta. So like if you cherry pick the studies, you can make it seem like it's beneficial. But at the end of the day, it depends on the cells in your body that you're looking at. It depends on the person because their genetics are different. But for the most part, it's extremely risky to be supplementing soy and trying to do that as a replacement for estrogen.
Well, isn't there an over-the-counter product that people were they were trying to mimic some estrogen. Of course, that would be synthetic then if it's over the counter that you get just at Walmart, right?
Well, sometimes they're derived from plants like licorice. Licorice root can increase estrogen,
okay.
and that can be beneficial in certain situations. And
Okay.
there's one called Equol, EQUOL. And that one is better if you're just trying to activate the beta receptor. But again, just go with bioidenticals.
It's a game changer.
It's natural.
My pellet appointment is next week. I mean, it's just something that I won't miss it. And it even helps estrogen for postmenopausal women, helps you sleep through the night. Sleep
Exactly.
maintenance.
Sleep is huge.
Staying
Yep.
asleep. Yeah. And the progesterone is a thing that obviously, this, women who wake up at 3 a.m., well, that is eradicated once you start with progesterone.
Yep.
So I wouldn't be sitting up right now with shiny hair if I didn't fast and if I didn't take bioidentical hormones. Like, it's so much a part of my equation for feeling good, which kind of then gets me into the conversation, because you can avoid mammograms. You have to fight with your healthcare provider to avoid them. And so I'm just using the thermography. Do you feel like that type of diagnostic tool is good enough for me to see anything that's, and I'm talking about just breast health. I'm not worried the rest of my body getting cancer, because I do all I can to be, I'm pretty darn healthy. So what's your thought on thermography?
Yeah, good question. I don't know enough about it. I mean, I tend in your direction, but I don't know that much. Yeah.
It's just heat waves. It's I guess thermal patterns and seeing. Because it's funny, when you do go for thermography, you can't even chew gum before you go. I don't, but, intermittent faster, I don't chew gum. I have all these things I don't do. Nice. But one of them is you can't even wear an underwire bra for the like 24 hours because of the thermal heat pattern that you can get from it, just looking at your body, how sensitive we are. Because, you were talking about, there was just something else you mentioned earlier, and I just think about radiation risks. But when I did have a questionable thermography a few years ago, I had to arm wrestle the clinics in Arkansas, because they said, well, you have to have a mammogram. I went, no, I don't. Watch. And I said, I wanted a breast ultrasound is what I wanted. And they said, but you have to have, if you come here, you have to have a mammogram. I went, well, then you'll have to chase me down, because I'm not going to. I mean,
I know, whatever happened to medical freedom, right?
Yeah, well, that's it. I mean, it's the whole medical, it's the autonomy of my body.
Yeah.
That we're all fighting.
Yeah. Oh, you have to. I feel like if you're not fighting it with all this what's going on right now, you're part of the problem really these days. I mean, we have to all be on the same team on that regard, because if you can't tell, like, these studies are nuanced, we have to go through them. We have to be able to debate all this stuff, not just about soy, but about, drugs that start with the letter V and the, ICCNE. And it's like, if you can't talk about this stuff without getting censored, well, that just opens Pandora's box for all kinds of shenanigans. And everybody should agree with that. I mean, it's so obvious, but that's the problem with this censorship push.
Yeah. It baffles me to the point where I'm speechless, because even we told you before we started recording we wanted to upload this to YouTube. Well, now YouTube has new parameters, and their algorithm they'll do something where they can find us if we said the V word.
I know,
and
isn't that
so
crazy?
To avoid it, and now you can't even get an Instagram, you can't even get a YouTube dislike.
Yeah, I know.
Because we're trying to keep certain theories alive. And they want something has happened. As long as everyone understands we're on the same page that all media is manipulated.
Right. Yeah, it's been very eye-opening, hopefully, for a lot of people that didn't realize that, because it took me a long time to realize that. And like, the cholesterol is a great poster child for that, because there's this guy Ansel Keys, and if people haven't read up on it, I mean, there's a lot of really good books and literature and reading. In fact, even Joseph Mercola did a really good, in one of his books called Fat for Fuel, he had the first 5 pages or whatever. He just told the whole story in one little condensed thing. It was phenomenal if you haven't heard that story about cholesterol. But that's a great example of, how badly you can screw up people's health. and screw up an entire country and create a bunch of heart disease that shouldn't be there, and literally
statins are bad for you. I mean,
right,
really bad for your immune system. Oh
yeah, for your brain, for your muscles,
for your brain, everything. Yeah, I just shake my head. I was
Right.
at an event in Arkansas a few years ago. So I've been a member of the media for 35 years, and I got to go. It was we have a wonderful heart hospital, private heart hospital, physician owned. And Mark Hyman came in. Dr. Hyman came, and I remember it was all physicians and me. I was the only member of the media. I got in. I mean, I had to sell a kidney on the black market to get there, but I got it. And when I was in there, I remember hearing the collective when he said, "I'm going to tell you something that's not popular. This is to a heart hospital. They're all cardiologists."
Cardiologists
He said,
are the worst.
"Stop writing statins." And I mean, they didn't know where to look because they were thinking, I won the trip to Cabo because I wrote the most statins last year. And he was saying, stop, just stop. And he showed, because I think he was a I think he was a vegan at one time. He had oxidative stress. He looked terrible. It was right after he finished maybe his residency, big black circles under his eyes. He had kind of the belly, that you get with all the foods and stuff like that. Yeah. And then he's 60 something now, vibrant, what he eats, he doesn't eat gluten and all that. I mean, just seeing the side by side, I was hoping it would open their eyes, because as we know, medical professionals in this country don't take any nutrition courses. They might take one course of something. And so they don't know the answer when you say, what, and I know you've alluded to this, and I don't believe in mandates, period, because I believe in freedom. But if we are mandating, why aren't we mandating and having doctors say, hey, your prescription today is to get an hour of vitamin D and then, go sweat someplace. These are all free things. So the other argument gets to be marginalized communities can't afford it. Well, the stuff I'm talking about is free.
Right. Intermittent fasting.
Fasting, autophagy, doing your cellular clean out. And it doesn't have to be all organic foods. But I've heard some say, Dr. Wolfson is an MD in the Phoenix area, functional medicine cardiologist. He's married to a chiropractor, so I love his philosophy. And he says when the argument comes back, well, it's expensive to get organic foods, he goes, quit dyeing your hair. Quit using these products that are the estrogen, the phthalates
the
and stuff like that.
Amounts of
serums
and all that stuff.
Move away from that. Quit buying the fake stuff that you put on your hands that kills germs. Use soap and water.
And you're saving money on all the surgeries that you're going to have to get in the future, and all the drugs and all the shenanigans you have to go through to deal with all that stuff. Because it compounds. It's like it never just ends with just Prozac and Zoloft and Lexapro. It just gets the list gets longer and longer if you go down that prescription train without any self thought and actual thinking for yourself. Oof, it snowballs fast,
It does, and it is just a part of our nomenclature. Ask your doctor if this drug is right for you.
Right,
rather
it's
than
marketing.
Yes, it's just marketing. And I have said many times on my podcast and publicly, I've not had the TV on since March 10th, 2020. I've not turned the TV on. Now I watch my device because I'm going to watch Yellowstone. I'm going to watch some things, but I've not. And I'm a member of the media. I'm retired now from radio, but even my people, I'm so disappointed in what Cumulus is making. If I were still there, I couldn't work there because I've made a decision for my body that does not align with their decision. So I hate, and then when you see, it'll say, the Anderson Cooper Show brought to you by Pfizer. CBS Morning News brought to you by Pfizer. Brought to you by Pfizer. Well, who makes the jab? Pfizer. I mean, that's what I hope, that it has people of deductive reasoning to think, you know what? Oh, if you do that, the outcome is this.
Yeah, especially if you can find scientists that are actually critical thinkers. A lot of scientists, their job kind of depends on them getting grants and being politically connected, because your name is on the grant. It's not anonymous. So if I write a grant, my name is unfortunately on it. And if for some reason I'm very vocal against the status quo and against Pfizer and against whatever, if I don't like children to have cardiomyopathies and heart damage and all this for some weird reason, I don't know why.
Yeah, crazy.
Why I would be
wacky.
Against children having heart damage, but if I'm against that, then you develop a reputation, and when people see your grant, they won't fund it, right? So you can lose your job slowly, just be bled out by your job with little cuts instead of just one giant swoop. So a lot of scientists just aren't very honest, and that's why when you started, it's like, it's rare to find a scientist who actually wants to stick up, but it's even more rare to find a doctor, because they're making $700,000 a year by just kind of doing their prescription drug thing, and they're getting their giant vacations and all that. So of course they're not going to risk that, unless it's like a nightmare scenario. So it's at least easier for me to be honest from that perspective, but we have to encourage honesty. I feel like we have to make a system that encourages doctors to say what they think and encourages scientists, and we're doing the opposite right now.
We're pushing them out.
Yeah.
Because they're getting blackballed if they write the medical exemption and they don't want their name on the paper. And I tell you who this harms. If we're in a community of diversity and getting women ahead, guess who can't come work for your employer if she's required to take the V? A pregnant woman, a nursing woman, a woman of fertility age. And so then you're back to having all men running your party or whatever it is you've got, your business, whatever it is you've got. Because these women say, because even the V, the people behind the V will say it was not tested on pregnant or nursing women. So it's, and I'm just really disappointed that healthcare facilities aren't at least, leaning into those women and saying, okay, just we'll give you a 2-year, reprieve.
Yeah.
And in 2 years we'll talk about it or whatever.
It's never been about health. It's always been about compliance. I mean, if you go to the Mayo Clinic, and you just go to the cafeterias, like every one that they have soda fountains all over the place. Everybody agrees soda is terrible for you. There's nobody that disagrees with that. Why the heck do they have it? Well, it's not really about optimizing your health. It's not really about staying healthy. And it's very transparent, And that's not just Mayo Clinic. I'm just saying, like, pretty much any clinic in the country is like that. But I'm just using that example because I live here in Rochester, and that's what I see in my day-to-day life. And, here's your drug.
It really is. It's really against, again, like you said, the status quo. A physician that I'm very good friends with here, he's a diagnostician, internal medicine. So he sees a lot of older patients, right? Because that's, they usually take care of older population. And when he found out I'm now a certified integrative nutritional health coach from the Institute for Integrative Nutrition, New York, and he was so excited, he said, great, will Medicare pay for this? He said, I'd love for you to health coach my clients, my patients, it'd be your clients. And I went, no, sadly, no. And then he thought, well, then I can't recommend them because everything's based on an insurance model.
Yeah.
So the thing I could do, helping people.
Actual health, help. Yeah.
Health coaching with a healthcare professional. These people then have to think, well, then I have to pay for that out of my pocket. I mean, I'm not expensive, but we have so trained people, Dr. J, to think, does insurance cover that?
I know. Oh, for sure. People ask me that all the time.
Yeah, like with especially oncology, any type of chemo, radiation, the people who go the other way and want to pursue health and alternative treatments spend tens of thousands, maybe $100,000 saving their life rather than taking that jab.
Yeah.
Of whatever that could be.
Oh, I know. Trust me. It's it's a messed up situation and messed up system. And, it's been like very eye-opening for a lot of people recently. And that's been a good thing because they're realizing they've got to think for themselves. They got to take their health into their own hands. But then also it's really wrecked a lot of people because there's been so much increase in alcoholism and junk food.
Oh, it's awful.
Nobody's talking about vitamin D and just really basic, obvious things. I mean, you are, but, it's not coming from the media and the top, like the mainstream, and it should be.
No. Now, you're in a blue state there. Do you have to show a vaccine a vaccination card to get into restaurants there?
No.
Yet.
Yeah, exactly.
Not yet.
No. Yeah.
Because that, do you see where Chipotle now in LA, to get their food, you have to have a vaccine? Yeah, a vaccination card.
So insane.
Yeah.
I'm glad I don't live there.
Yeah.
I would have moved for sure if I lived out in California or New York at this point.
There are a lot of places I'd go, well, who I hate it for there are the poor who can't get out.
Yeah,
because
right.
they don't have the opportunity. So if we're here to embrace and lock arms with the poor, we're sure not doing a good job of it, because we're not helping them.
The good news is, I know exactly. Well, a lot of it's education, because if they just realize there's a huge opportunity on the job market right now, if there was ever a time you can leverage that and get a different job in a state that actually has freedom, like South Dakota. You know, I spent a lot of time in South Dakota when they shut my research lab down in Mayo Clinic.
Oh.
When there was even like a whiff of COVID, they shut my research area and they turned it into a COVID response unit. And for literally like the next several months, we had one COVID case in the next several months, and they had my whole area shut down. And so instead, I just went over to South Dakota, literally for like months, with my family. And we just had a grand old time going to restaurants and going to church and no masks. And they've never done the mask thing over there, and they never needed to. I mean, number one, they don't have that much population density, but number two, nobody was believing the media because they have a lot of common sense. Florida's been good, but not as good as South Dakota, because some of the towns in Florida, they're still mask mandating and they're still fear mongering. But South Dakota's been amazing throughout this whole thing. So at least I'm close by some reasonable people.
Guess what? I'm not close by, but we got in a car and went there last month because I'm not going to fly. So we had to you can get the map and it'll show you which are maskless states if you want to travel, if you choose to travel. And so we drove from Arkansas, Kansas City, and we went up to South Dakota, spent time there.
Nice.
Wyoming. It started, gotten a little dicey in Jackson Hole coming down. Oh, they're so wonderful in Utah. Everyone needs to go to Utah. Amazing.
Yeah,
Sundance was amazing. But then got into Santa Fe, started slapping our wrist again.
It's so funny. I know, it's so unbelievable.
It is.
Yeah, people love power. They like to control other people, and man, if you give them an inch, they'll take a mile, and that's what we're seeing.
That's right. Yeah. Well, we can't solve that now. Tucker Carlson tries to. I mean, and this is what's so interesting about what people think. They go, well, Tucker Carlson's had the shot. And we go, that's the point. He chose to.
So the freedom,
It's just the freedom. I don't care what you do. I do not care what anyone does around me in their personal life. I just don't make me do
Well, and the other thing is this idea that like, oh, Tucker got it or whatever. Some people aren't necessarily... It's not freedom of choice because they're being coerced. If he has a house in Maine and all this, and he probably has to go flying around internationally and stuff.
That's true.
He's probably been coerced. So even that argument is a little sketchy.
Yeah, that's true.
Because a lot of people aren't admitting it, but they're only getting it because they're being forced.
Oh, for sure.
And so it's really sad situation that this has come to at this point, and we have to figure out how to reverse that.
Right.
But, especially when it comes to kids, because that's a hill that I think most parents should be willing to die on.
I hope so.
You can't be forcing kids to get something that's dangerous for them,
I hope not. I mean, as I say this as a grandmother, I pray all the time, so it's all we can do. Okay, I could solve the world's problems with you just one subject at a time. I'm putting, of course, your social media link in this show notes, as well as the book. That one book. Have you written other books? I'm sure you have.
No,
okay,
I haven't.
Good.
No,
okay, good. Then I'm not behind.
Many peer-reviewed publications, but nothing worth reading. They're boring.
Right. No. Well, you have fun hunting in Arkansas, and in your book, you tell all about going to school in Florida and how you love the sunshine. You didn't know how plentiful it could be, and it's very plentiful. So everyone listening, go out and get vitamin D today, and hook up with him in his social media. Thanks for listening to the Lisa Fisher Said podcast. Be sure to hit subscribe and download all the episodes and leave a review, won't you? The Lisa Fisher Said podcast is produced by ClantonCreative.com.